Fox News alert. Straight to a Fox News alert. Hurricane Irma's new deadly path of destruction. Now a worst-case scenario for the state of Florida.
Wow. Miami in the Florida Keys bracing for a direct hit from the strongest hurricane in recorded history. The massive storm's death toll now rising as it barrels through the Caribbean at 11.
Atlantic history, and this is brand new video of Irma's violent fury as the now Cat 4 hurricane hit the islands of Turks and Caicos overnight.
And that hurricane now targeting the state of Florida. Nearly 1 million people being told to evacuate. The governor, Rick Scott, ordering schools and hospitals to close their doors. Authorities are warning millions not to roll the dice with Irma.
They keep betting against Mother Nature. The day's coming, they're going to lose.
Don't even call 911 because nobody's going to answer the phone.
All right, right now, Hurricane Irma is on the move. It's heading to the Bahamas, then it's going to Cuba.
Irma is expected to arrive in the Florida Keys late tomorrow night. We have live team coverage from Florida right now. Jillian Mealy is live in Miami, but we start with Griff Jenkins, who is live in Key Largo. And Griff, as we look at the European model, it pretty much takes us, the storm, right over where you are right now.
And that's going to be a huge problem, Steve, because, you know, they're talking about, of course, the wind, which would be unprecedented devastation, but also the storm surge here in Key Largo. Just look with me at these boats that are moored. They're trying to do their best to get it, but you can see if you have a storm surge of 10, 15, even 20 feet, these boats are going into these houses. It could, according to one resident, actually put this entire island under water. We talked to one of those residents as she was getting out of town. She said she was nearly killed in Andrew, and that if that water comes as they predict here, there's really nowhere to run. Take a listen.
I almost died in Andrew in 1992, which was when I first moved down from Buffalo, New York. So I've been here 17 years in the Keys, and there's nowhere to run. If the water comes up, that's the end.
And the bigger problem is, of course, if you did stay, no one is coming for you. You heard the administrator there saying, don't dial 911. They could be stranded here, the residents, to stay behind for weeks or months if they're cut off from the mainland, guys. And only about 5% of the Keys remains, according to the officials, but that 5% could be in for a very rough haul.
Absolutely.
We were all noticing how calm the water is behind you. Like you said, the calm before the storm.
It is. All right, Griff, thank you very much. And he makes a great point. The emergency preparedness people say once the winds get above 40 miles per hour, we can't come out to save you.
Not many basements in Florida, right?
No, a lot of slabs.
So where do you hide? I mean, there are very few two-floor buildings.
You don't want to be on the second floor. You want to go is inland. And right now they're calling for evacuations along the flood-prone area where the storm surge is going to be very high. Meanwhile, Jillian Mealy, it picks up our live team coverage. She's in Miami where people are having trouble finding gas that they need to hunker down or to get the heck out of Dodge with.
I know, guys, in this portion of Miami, we're right by the airport. The gas shortage has been the big story for days. I mean, we've spent countless hours just driving around looking at the gas stations. We sat in line for an hour to get gas for our truck yesterday. And you can see right now we're at 7th and 57th Avenue, and there is gas at the Chevron. They have quite a system going on here, actually, I will say. Depending on the side that your gas tank is on, they're kind of diverting lanes of traffic here. Some points in the morning, it was a little chaotic with traffic lining up here along this road. But as you can see right now, we've got, 3 cars in line. If you're in the Miami area and you need gas, head out here right now. I'm not kidding, because as you drive around, you just see bags over every gas pump over there. So it's hard to find gas in this area. I think a lot of people spent yesterday and Wednesday filling up their cars, but if you need it, I'm telling you, now is a good time to get it, guys.
All right, Jillian, thank you very much.
All right, no one is tracking the path of this hurricane closer than Janice Dean. Janice, anything changed over the last half hour?
New advisory. So the winds are down a little bit, but the storm is actually trying to strengthen. It goes through a period of time where it's restructuring because it's trying to strengthen. An eye wall replacement cycle is what it's going through. So ultimately, it means it's trying to get bigger, wider wind field. I mean, this is a big storm. Hurricane force miles extending 70 miles from the center of the storm. So this storm is going to cover the state of Florida. One thing I can tell you is if the track moves a little bit more to the south, it's going to be influenced by the landmass of Cuba and the mountains. That we could hope for that. If that happens, that would be good. It would weaken. But the National Hurricane Center has updated its forecast and is expecting this storm to strengthen yet again because we've got a lot of warm water. If it doesn't interact with land and it continues on this trajectory, it's still going to deal with warm waters ahead of it of about 90 degrees. And the worst case scenario is the center of the storm coming on top of South Florida and the Keys, because the worst of the storm surge, the worst of the winds, the worst of the rainfall is going to happen. So again, look at the sea surface temperatures. If it does not interact with land, it's going to continue to strengthen. If we have a strengthening storm upon landfall, that's even worse for South Florida because the winds bump up at the last minute. We're going to get worse storm surge, unfortunately, and the worst winds effect along South Florida. So of course, we're going to be 24 hours starting tomorrow on this storm. Back to you.
Janice, what's your advice for people that live like in the middle part of Florida, not down in Miami? I know they need to evacuate.
Well, listen, this storm is going to take up all of the state of Florida, okay? It's about 400 miles wide. So every area is going to experience possible hurricane force winds. Obviously, along the coast, that's where the storm surge is. That's where the potential catastrophic storm surge is going to be across South Florida and the Keys, 5 to 10 foot storm surge. So if you can move inland away from that storm surge, that's what the FEMA people are telling us, then you're better off.
Indeed. All right, Janice, thank you very much. Meanwhile, let's dial in Geraldo, who joins us today from Cleveland. Geraldo, the cover of the New York Post says, here comes Irma-geddon, combining the name of the hurricane with the fact that, as Janice has mentioned, this looks like it could be a worst-case scenario.
You know, Grandma Lil, my 98-year-old beautiful mom, the matriarch of the far-flung Rivera clan, we evacuated her from Siesta Key, you know it well, Steve, near Sarasota, to Craig's house on the eastern end of Long Island. So we're all going to, have a reunion, a wonderful reunion with Grandma on Sunday. The point is that, as Janice describes, the entire peninsula of Florida will be involved in this storm. It seems the worst-case scenario. It's going to be a very wicked Sunday. The one solace I take, the one comfort I take from these otherwise grim predictions is the functioning of FEMA. Having watched FEMA through the very many hurricanes that I've covered up close and personally, this fellow Brock Long is such a far cry from Michael Brown, the administrator who had to resign in disgrace after Hurricane Katrina. I think that Brock Long is doing a very masterful professional job, and I think that's a reflection of President Trump's absolute engagement and involvement in these disasters. I think that he recognized, President Trump did, certainly after Harvey, that with these two storms, Harvey and Irma, and God knows what else is out there waiting for the people of the United States, that politics could be pushed aside and everyone could concentrate on these imminent disasters to mitigate the problems, the aftermath. It's going to be bad for Florida. I don't think there's any arrogance in South Beach. It's going to be underwater, a lot of it, and we'll see what they can rebuild. I'm sure that they'll be fine, but I'm glad the federal government has responded.
All right, Geraldo, let's move on and talk about politics, because the president's got to give his eye on about 4 or 5 plates that he has spinning in the air. And last week, you sat on the couch and you said you feared, and I'll just paraphrase, you feared that all the mean things that people had said about the president were true if he told these DACA kids to leave. He gave him a 6-month, gave Congress 6-month window to come up with a deal for the 800,000 that were brought here by their parents at a very young age. And the president took it a step farther yesterday, tweeting this out. For all those DACA kids that are concerned about your status during the 6-month period, you have nothing to worry about. What's your reaction?
My reaction is that I like to think in my own mind, that in my own heart, that my dear old friend, the 45th President of the United States, who was watching Fox and Friends that morning, heard my heartfelt plea and knew that if people like me who are rooting for him 100% tell him that this is a very bad thing to do and that I have to rethink my relationship if he went down that road, to be heartless and cruel, as some of his critics were suggesting, that I couldn't be friends with him anymore. Well, whatever it was, I don't know if I had a scintilla of influence, but I am delighted that the President of the United States States has done the right thing for these 800,000 absolutely comprehensively vetted young people, all of whom have jobs or in the military or in college. I think that he did a wonderful, wonderful thing. He is right. Congress has to pass a law. Congress legislates, not the presidency. But he had enough pragmatic idealism, is what I call it. He had enough compassion, but also the good sense of a businessman to say, listen, you kids, you haven't done anything wrong. Your parents dragged you here when you were babies, or the average age 6 years old, and I'm not going to punish you for the deeds of your parents or the deeds of the former president of the United States, who went arguably beyond his constitutional authority to pass this executive order.
You think he was just bluffing, though? You think he was just playing the poker game, and that was the card? He just said, I'm going to send the dreamers back home or back to their parents' original countries, just to get the Democrats, just to alert the Democrats. Then he has the meeting with Nancy Pelosi, with Chuck Schumer, and he says, you know what? I'll keep the dreamers here if you give me the wall.
Well, I don't know how much horse trading Ainsley he actually did. It seemed to me that he wanted to clear the decks. He saw Harvey and the mess that created and all those poor people suffering from all that flood damage. And now he saw Irma, the most powerful storm. I've heard Janice Dean and our other meteorologists suggesting the most powerful Atlantic hurricane ever going to land, point blank on the Florida Peninsula. He just said, listen, there's too much going on.
Yeah.
I mean, we got Harvey, we got Irma, we got North Korea.
A budget, a debt ceiling.
Fight about the debt ceiling. I want to do tax reform. And anyway, his so-called allies in the Republican Party, they sure didn't do him any favors during health care. I mean, the Freedom Caucus stabbed him in the back, as I said. He couldn't rely on the Democrats, on the Republicans. So he showed the best thing about him dealing with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. And I would love to have, had a lie detector on Schumer and the president when they were face to face there. The best thing that happened is the signal he sent down the road, or rather up Pennsylvania Avenue to Capitol Hill, to Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell. If you don't play ball with me, then I'm going to deal with the devil. And I think it worked. Well,
let's see if the Democrats will say, okay, we're going to show you gave us something, we're going to give you something. So maybe let's see if they want to play ball, or they're just trying to take advantage of some friction and fracture on the Republican side.
Don't be so skeptical.
All right. Geraldo, have a great weekend, and thank you very much for joining us today from Cleveland. All right, still ahead on this Friday, Judge Jeanine Pirro is going to be joining us. Also former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich and Toby Keith, all here live.
Plus, more in our top story, the race against time to escape Hurricane Irma, now closing on the Florida coast. Mass evacuations underway. We're live on the ground as Floridians try and get out before the storm hits. That story next.
We are back with a Fox News alert. You're looking at live pictures from the state of Florida as residents are rushing to evacuate before Irma comes ashore. Look at that. All the people on the right-hand side of your screen leaving.
We know where they're going. They're going north. Meanwhile, moments ago, Hurricane Irma's death toll risen to 14. Just hours from hitting right now, the storm is Miami and the Keys and the balance of the state, it looks like. At least 700,000 people statewide told to get out or prepare for the worst.
And meanwhile, Jeff Flock is in. Jeff Flock from the Fox Business Network picks up our coverage live in Port Orange, Florida. Jeff, I see a lot of cars going by.
Looks like 95.
Good news and yeah, it is exactly right, guys. It is 95. Good news and bad news. The good news is that 95 is moving all the way from Miami to this point. This is the first real choke point that we've got on 95, which is tremendous news to me because yesterday we had a lot of backups, problems with gas and that sort of thing. But this is the first choke point all the way from Miami. And it is a choke point. As you see, people are slowing down here, but they've made good progress. I'm very optimistic about what I see out here in terms of people getting through. If you look across to the other side of the road, you see that's the southbound lane. They have not done contraflow yet. At some point, presumably, they will do that. They will shut that to southbound traffic, and they will make all of these lanes, 6 lanes in total, all of them going north. That will happen shortly, but the reason they haven't done it this far is because they want to make sure gas deliveries get through, because you need gas down south in order to get north. So far, so good. This is as good a news, I think, given the situation, that we can report to you this morning.
Absolutely. But, Jeff, here's the question. All right, they're trying to leave Florida. Where are they going? I mean, this storm could go up into Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee. Who knows?
If they can get up far enough, they go west. That's where I'd go if I was going somewhere, unless I had a boat to take me out to Europe or something. So I think that's a possibility. But here's the other problem. You got a lot more people leaving from the center part of the state. A lot of these guys live in the central Florida area because they say, I don't want to deal with that hurricane stuff. And so they live in the central part of the state. Well, this hurricane is probably coming over them. So we got more people probably on the road than we've ever had in Florida before.
Sure. I can think of another word to describe the hurricane. You came real close. Jeff Flock on 95, heading north near Daytona. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm glad, we were all wondering, why aren't they opening the other side of the highway and letting people go north? And he answered that question for us. Tomorrow they will do that.
Sure. 6 lanes north.
They always do that with the Midtown Tunnel. Traffic in and out. They'll move the median. Meanwhile, 19 minutes after the hour, the FBI stonewalling a lawyer trying to get files on the Hillary Clinton email investigation because they say nobody cares. Can the feds really make that call? What's this, American Idol? Judge Janine is here, and she's fired up for a change.
At least 15 people are dead after Mexico's biggest earthquake in 100 years. Mass evacuations now underway over major concerns about potential tsunamis now, hours after that 8.2 magnitude tremor struck the southern coast. This brand new video shows light swaying back and forth inside an office building. My word. The earthquake felt by nearly 50 million people. Hundreds of homes and businesses are now destroyed.
Meanwhile, in other news, access denied. The FBI rejecting attorney Ty Clevenger's request, that is to say, for files on the Hillary Clinton email probe because they say there is, quote, not enough public interest. Oh, really? Last night, he told Tucker Carlson he thinks there's an FBI cover-up.
Senator Graham and Senator Grassley released a letter indicating that the former FBI director, James Comey, had already decided to exonerate Mrs. Clinton before she was even interviewed. And so at this point, I think the FBI is trying to cover its own rear end. I mean, I think they know this thing's going to look terrible for them. They deep-sixed this, they whitewashed it, and they don't want the documents coming out just showing how badly they covered it up.
Wow, can you imagine that? Well, there were also rumors that they might have paid for that famous dossier. The host of Justice with Janine Pirro, the judge is here with us. Judge, this outrages you. I never heard of a popularity deciding whether something's released or not.
Well, first of all, she is a public figure. The woman ran for president on a major party line. She hasn't gone away since then. She won't go away. She's writing a book. Every week she comes up with someone else to blame, and the FBI uses this dishonest excuse that there's really no public interest in her in this case. This is what happened. We found out last week through Grassley and Senators Grassley and Lindsay that the FBI and the State Department both resisted, or the Department of Justice, both resisted FOIA requests on that tarmac meeting between Hillary and Bill Clinton. Now we've got the FBI saying, look, we don't want to give you any information as it relates to our investigation. Why? Because they're going to be embarrassed. Sure. And this is about public corruption. So when you have the head of the FBI writing an exoneration in April, the president at the same time saying there was no malicious intent, and you've got no grand jury, immunity deals being handed out like lollipops, and targets being able to sit in on each other's meetings. I mean, this is public corruption. It's time for Jeff Sessions to impanel a grand jury and do the right thing here.
And James Comey might be called back to the Hill?
James Comey needs to be the target of an active criminal investigation for public corruption.
So during the Obama administration, the Department of State and the Department of Justice were reluctant to reveal those things. What about during this administration? Now can they pry them open? Or are those same people who are part of the swamp keeping it secret?
I love the question, because I did my open last week on just this, that there are individuals in the State Department and in Justice who are objecting to the release of this information. Now what we found out just yesterday, the Justice Department and the FBI said, yeah, I think we're going to release this because everyone realizes that you've got the deep state people who are continuing to lock down on the corruption during the Obama administration. It's got to stop. And the only way it's going to stop is for Tillerson to release all the State Department emails. I mean, the guy is great when it comes to world issues. He's got to understand government. He's got to stand up and release this information, and Sessions needs to do the same.
Judge, let's talk about another corruption trial. You have Bob Menendez. Yesterday was the second day of his trial, and he's been under fire because he allegedly has this friend down in Florida, this eye doctor down in Florida. There was corruption. They were pay for play kind of thing. So the second day of the trial, big deal, right? It's a big news story. ABC, NBC, CBS, zero coverage last night.
Are you surprised?
He's a Democratic senator, former senator.
I think, look, you've got the first senator in almost 40 years who's being charged with bribery and in almost a decade corruption. The first, one of 12 sitting United States senators to be indicted. This is serious stuff. This is federal charges by the Obama administration. All right. The fact that the mainstream media is not covering it is an indication that they're all about truth and justice, and they're not criminals. Debbie Wasserman Schultz. You want me to keep going?
No, Judge, his attorneys say, look, it's not bribery if you're just trying to help a friend.
Yeah, well, you know what? Friendship is not a defense to bribery. And even the judge said, and I respect the judge for saying this, you know what? This isn't a tabloid trial. This isn't about the fact that you're Hispanic and therefore you're being indicted. That's a bunch of hogwash. I know it's been brought up. And that's why the judge said, no more. I like this judge. Let's see how this goes. But the guy that he's charged with taking $1 million in donations and gifts was the #1 Medicare paid doctor in 2012. He's already been convicted of 67 counts of Medicare fraud. I mean, this is public corruption. Let's clean the swamp.
Right.
Get rid of them.
The impact of Menendez trial would be indisputable because there's going to be a Republican governor filling the gap if he's found guilty.
Indeed.
All goes back to politics.
We'll be watching your show this weekend. It's going to be on about the time it's hitting the fan down south.
I know. We're going to be covering the storm, and, you know, our hearts and prayers go out to everyone down there in Florida and along the coast. I mean, we lost our home in a flood years ago, and this is not it's not a nice experience.
A very efficient governor.
The governor said,
great.
Yeah.
I loved what he said. He said, we can always rebuild houses, but we can't rebuild lives.
Right.
Yes.
Amen.
Right.
And prayers to everybody down south impacted. All right, Judge, we'll see you this weekend. Meanwhile, coming up, the death toll rising as Hurricane Irma races toward Florida. Millions now scrambling to evacuate from low-lying areas. We're live on the ground, tracking the storm. Coming up next. Is crazy. A Fox News alert. Overnight, Hurricane Irma hit Turks and Caicos, the islands, and now the state of Florida just hours away from facing Hurricane Irma's violent rage in the form of some tropical winds of the storm that is blamed for at least 14 deaths.
Think about Sandals and that environment there.
Sandals, you mean the resort?
Right in Turks and Caicos.
Right. Well, the historic monster storm, it's on the move. It's headed straight up through the Keys and into Miami. You are looking live in Tampa. This is in Tampa. This is bumper-to-bumper traffic, at least on the right-hand side of your screen, as nearly 1 million people statewide are trying to get out. At least it's moving, though.
That's right, and that is Interstate 75.
All right, Julian, I'm not sure where you are in relation to this. I know you're at a location at a gas station this morning where people are having trouble finding gas. Where are you, Jillian?
So we actually moved just about 4 blocks down from where we've been all morning, still in Miami near the airport. I do want to tell you, about 2 blocks that way, there's a gas station completely closed, no gas. So we came here, again, as I mentioned, about 4 blocks away from where we were at the Chevron. Take a look at the price here. $2.99. As I've been telling you guys about all morning long, you drive around, you see some stations that are more expensive than others. That's just kind of the situation down here. We've been driving around for days. The average price seems to be around $2.75, $2.76. We paid in the high 260s yesterday. You can see a line of cars right now just waiting to get in here because at this point they're running out of options. But the price is becoming a bit of a problem to some people. Take a listen to Pam Bondi.
You cannot inflate prices during the time of a hurricane for essential commodities. We noticed we had about 45 complaints against Chevron gas station. So Chevron, if you're watching me right now, you need to call us and tell us why your prices are inflated in South Florida.
And this is a Chevron. We were at a Chevron all morning. This is 4 blocks away and 10 cents more. So that's the situation that they're looking at here in Florida. But people just say, you got to get gas. You got to go. So they're dealing with it, guys.
Yeah, these gas stations know that. People will pay the price. They'll pay whatever to get their families out and safe.
And then the big issue after the storm will be none of them will have electric in order to have the pumps work, and there won't be gas at all.
Right.
So that'll be a different story.
That's why they're gassing up now as they hunker down. Meanwhile, Janice Dean is joining us right now. Janice, 35 minutes ago, there was an update on the track of the storm.
Right, the track has stayed the same. It is weakened a little bit, but I don't want people to let their guard down because actually the storm is trying to strengthen. It goes through a process called an eye wall replacement cycle, and that's what's happening with this storm. And what it means is the storm is trying to restructure and get stronger because it's got a lot of warm water ahead of it, and the wind field is expanding. So this storm is actually getting bigger by the hour, and you can tell it's filling up the screen right now. It's going to go across Florida and affect every single corner of the state of Florida as we get into the weekend. So 150 mile per hour sustained winds, still a strong Category 4 storm with the potential for the winds to get bumped up over the next 12 to 24 hours. Hurricane warnings in the maroon shaded areas. Also want to point out we have storm surge warnings where we could see upwards of 5 to 10 foot storm surge on these vulnerable areas that are below sea level. And that's why this storm is so dangerous. Track has not changed. We're still expecting really the worst case scenario possible for South Florida and the Keys as the worst of the storm surge, the winds and the rain will be coming on shore Saturday night into Sunday. That's why they are evacuating, close to 1 million people here. And, people need to hunker down, move northward, move inland away from the storm surge. Back to you guys.
Indeed. All right, Janice, thank you very much. Also, there are 2 atomic power plants in the path of the storm, Turkey Creek and St. Lucie, and they are shutting them down. It takes 24 hours to shut everything down. They are doing that because they are in the path of the storm right now.
That's definitely our top story today. Also, another big story, politics. We've been talking this morning about D.C. Last night was Paul Ryan's dinner with the president. So Todd Pyro is actually in Wisconsin, which is the state where Paul Ryan is from.
Dinner. Yeah. He did not have dinner in Wisconsin, yes.
You mean the president and Paul Ryan had dinner at the White House.
Yes.
Todd is having breakfast at a place called Daddy Maxwell's. It's in Williams Bay, Wisconsin, and that is in Paul Ryan's district.
Yeah, you guys set it up perfectly. President Trump won this county, Walworth County, pretty handily. It is also, as you said, Speaker Ryan's district. So we're talking to the people about, do they agree with the speaker? Do they agree with the president? We're going to start out with Andy. Andy is very interesting. He's a Trump voter, had voted for Speaker Paul Ryan up until this past election when he did not. And he says he's got to get with the program. Why do you say that?
Well, he's become one of the good old boys now and one of the swamp dwellers. So he needs to either show some leadership or he needs to move on. And by the way, why doesn't he have the same health insurance that everybody else that we have to pay for? He's being subsidized by us for his health care, and the whole Congress is too. It's a little secret that nobody knows.
All right, Andy, thank you for your time. Bill doesn't necessarily agree with you. Bill is a Trump voter and a big supporter of Speaker Ryan. Why are you such a big fan of the speaker?
Well, I believe he's a visionary. I believe in his programs. His current program is the end game with tax reform, is to put everything on a simple postcard. That's going to change the game. Americans have so much trepidation about filling out their tax pages, multiple pages. If we can get it down to one page and do it in 15 minutes, that's going to save a lot of anxiety and simplicity for Americans. And that's one of Paul's ideas.
Bill, thank you for your time. The debate will rage on with regard to Paul Ryan here in Daddy Maxwell's. But before we go, I want to give a huge shout out first to Jeanette for allowing us to be in her diner. Give her a round of applause, everybody. And I also want to bring in Janet here. Janet and Jeanette. Janet, show us the shirts that you made.
It's a Fox and Friends shirt.
You see that? It's embroidered. Fox and Friends right there. I got to say, we do a ton of these diner segments all over the country. The folks here in Williams Bay, Wisconsin could not have been more hospitable to us. They've been amazing, and they pack this diner with enthusiasm a lot of sugar from a lot of donuts.
A good way to start the weekend. Well, that was terrific. All right, Todd.
Great way to start the weekend.
Love them there.
No kidding. All
Thanks,
right.
Todd.
I'll bring it back, Ainsley. I'm on it.
Please do.
They look so good.
All right, a lovely goodie bag. All right, meanwhile, coming up, Newt Gingrich is going to join us live with observations about the president dealing with the Democrats.
would Speaker Newt Gingrich have cut the deal the president did? And how would he feel as a Republican speaker if the Republican president cut a deal with Democratic leadership? Joining us now to talk about that, the speaker himself, the former speaker, Newt Gingrich. Newt, would you have cut that deal if you were President Trump?
Sure. I think you had set up two good questions. Would I feel a bit irritated if I was Speaker Ryan? Yes. Would I have cut the deal if I were President Trump? Yes. Both are true. I think Trump saw a situation with everything he just saw in Houston, now looking at what's coming at Florida, and I think his feeling was, we got to get some movement in Washington. We spent 8 months and we didn't get big things done. I'm going to cut a deal with somebody. I'm going to get something done this week. I'm going to get the money to Houston, and to do that, I've got to get the debt ceiling taken care of. And he cut a 90-day deal. Now we'll see what happens during the 90 days. I don't think this is some gigantic earthquake. I think it's an immediate tactical move by the president to get some momentum.
Is it going to work? Are we finally getting the speaker and Mitch McConnell's attention?
Well, I think he's always had McConnell and Ryan's attention. I mean, the problem McConnell has is he's got a very narrow majority in the Senate. McConnell carries 49 out of 52, and people say that's a failure. Well, people don't want to blame Chuck Schumer, who had 48-0 against Trump on health care. The same thing with Ryan. Ryan ultimately took 2 tries. He ultimately got repeal of Obamacare through the House. So I don't think it's that they're not trying to cooperate. I think that it's a very hard job. They're trying to do very big things.
Right.
And I think that both Ryan and McConnell understand the whole game this fall is the tax cut. If they get the kind of tax cut through the Secretary Mnuchin has been describing, well, I call it a tax cut because I don't think the average American in the end gets excited by tax reform. But I think if they have more money in their pocket by Christmas, if they see more economic growth, if they see more job creation, then this will have been a successful year.
Sure.
It comes down to one gigantic bill. And I think they are going to work together, and I doubt very much if he's going to have Schumer and Pelosi helping him pass a tax cut.
But I tell you what, Speaker, you've got to admit there were big smiles on the faces of Chuck and Nancy a couple of days ago. And what the weird part is I was watching television, and there were a lot of Democrats talking about what a good leader the President of the United States was in doing this particular deal, something they had not said before that moment.
Look, and it's going to be fascinating to watch because you'll notice when Senator Feinstein said that the president was right, that the DACA agreement was unconstitutional, she suddenly had left-wing Democrats in California saying, oh, she's going to get a primary opponent. I want to see what the left does. If Pelosi and Schumer make this a habit, they will have a rebellion on their left in a matter of weeks. This is a one-time deal. For the president, it's a very smart deal. It gets momentum the first week back. It changes the tone. It gets the money to Houston, and it postpones the big fight over the debt ceiling for 90 days. And I think the president's attitude is, who knows what's going to happen over 90 days?
Mr. Speaker, what's kind of interesting, too, is that these two leaders have cut a deal with the president. That also sets a precedent. It sets a precedent for other Democrats who want to vote what's best for the country and aren't dug into party ideology. There's no longer the fear of reprisal because their so-called leaders who said you have to resist this president went along at least once. There is now a reason and something to look back on when there's an issue that they can agree with the president on.
If you're trying to get some Democratic votes on the big tax cut bill, or as you put it, the big tax reform bill, it's nice to break the ice. It's a little harder now for Schumer and Pelosi to say, no, 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 you can't vote with Trump, as they cheerfully stood next to him saying you can vote with Trump. So I think you're right. It actually makes it easier for people like Senator Heitkamp from North Dakota, who did fly on the airplane to North Dakota, Trump's second best state that has a Democratic senator, and she has a lot more pressure today to vote yes on the tax bill.
I don't know if the President of the United States was listening to you, Newt, but within the last minute, a moment ago, you were talking a little bit about the number of votes McConnell has and how many Schumer has, and Donald Trump just tweeted out, Republicans, sorry, but I've been hearing about repeal and replace for 7 years. Didn't happen. Even worse, the Senate filibuster rule will never allow the Republicans to pass even great legislation. 8 Democrats control will will rarely get 60 versus 51 votes. It is a Republican death wish. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it's slightly strong, but I think he's making a point here. Senator McConnell is a traditionalist. He wrote a brilliant book called The Long Game, talking about his love of the Senate and the importance of the Senate in the U.S. Constitution. And I think what the president's saying is, look, if you stick with 60 votes as the key threshold, then as president, I got to go find a bunch of Democrats. Yep. So you got to have it one way or the other. You want an all-Republican policy decision, you got to break the filibuster with 51 votes. Right. You don't want to break it with 51 votes. You force me to go find Democrats. I think it's a very legitimate conversation being held, as it often is in this country, in public.
It's always good to see you, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. Have a great weekend.
Great to be with you.
And of course, Understanding Trump is still a bestseller. His book is still great.
I think everything he writes is a bestseller, isn't
Right,
it?
absolutely. Fiction and nonfiction. Meanwhile, this is true. I wouldn't say this, wouldn't make this up. His songs have become anthems for America.
Seems everyone in the Southeast is holding their breath, hoping for the best. Irma is massive, you know that. We'll talk with the National Hurricane Center live in a moment to let you know the latest on that. Breaking news on a massive earthquake, what we're learning from Mexico at the moment. In politics, the aftershocks continue after the deal with President Trump that he made with Democrats. We'll debate that. And will North Korea